An essential part of our healing is being able to tell the truth to ourselves about the nature of the relationship with the person that we've identified as the pathological narcissist. Nobody truly knows what you have to deal with day in, day out. I remember what it was like for me to exist in silence, feeling and knowing that I was living a lie. The ability to be truthful with ourselves can be the catalyst that propels us to our freedom. It takes courage to be able to look at a situation that we know deep down is not good for us, see it with clarity and truth, and notice when we're trying to reassure ourselves by saying, oh, they're not so bad, or they're not abusive every day, and there's a reason why they're not abusive every day, but that's another topic for another video. The exercise that I'll talk about in this video is a must for people who can't sever ties and are trapped with feelings of guilt, shame, or being overly responsible. It's also really helpful for those who are prone to accepting the version of reality that the abuser has gaslighted them to believe. And for people who occasionally fall into a trance and get sentimental about all the wonderful times. For those who still have trouble defining and setting boundaries because they're still sometimes confused and have doubts about what really happened to them. Whether that person ticks most of the boxes for being a psychopath or malignant narcissist, I don't know your specific situation, obviously, but that you recognize that you have symptoms of being in an abusive relationship. And the point of this exercise is to amp up your clarity. Let's remember that abuse is abuse. So let's focus on the behavior and not on attempting to diagnose the person, because this is missing the point and distracting ourselves. And again, making the relationship, the toxic person, the orbit of our lives. When we're in dysfunctional relationships, we often go back and forth. We can't burn our bridges, and that's because there's often a program that we don't realize we're repeating. And once we identify the program and we can see the pattern, we can no longer pretend that we don't see it. So seeing it means we must hold ourselves accountable. Most of my life, I must admit that I lived in a state of denial. I ignored the truth right in front of me, and I rejected the fact that abusive behavior was a pervasive and ongoing pattern. Yeah, of course, I wanted to hate, to blame, and distract myself from facing the most empowering question, which was, why was I tolerating hurtful, abusive behavior? Why was I tolerating my boundaries being violated? And basically saying it's okay for me to be invisible in this unreciprocal relationship. It was really about me, because the only person that I can change is myself. I kept making the same choices, expecting or waiting the other person to change. And that's insanity, yeah? And I honestly think that one of the biggest reasons why we tolerate abuse or go back and forth to abusive relationships is because we've been made to believe that it's normal. If we've only ever seen dysfunction, how can we ever know what is healthy and what is a loving way to behave? So we need to get very clear with what's not okay. It is not okay to be verbally attacked, threatened, ignored, shamed, or forced to do something you don't agree with. It is not okay to be made to feel guilty for what another person is not willing to take responsibility for. And it is definitely not okay to be treated like an object of someone else's gratification. And let's get really clear about this fact, and that is just because someone didn't physically harm you, that they're not abusive. Emotional and psychological abuse is about control. It is never okay for someone to mess with your head. And it is never okay for someone to continuously act like a victim when they are the perpetrator. We are not meant to live in an environment that is filled with uncertainty and apprehension. You need to remember very clearly of what you endured. So the exercise I'll ask you to consider doing for yourself is if you're still disregarding the toll that one relationship can have on all aspects of your life, how contact with just one person can affect your physical health, your spiritual growth, your work, and so forth. See, our ability to think clearly and discern right from wrong is of utmost importance. We need to get very familiar with our own emotions and our moral compass. And in order for you to do that, you need to know with certainty and remember the reality of what actually happened. The faster you can find your emotional bearings, your true north, the faster you can move on to live your authentic life. Not remain under the shadow of an emotional predator who still occasionally sweeps in and looms over you, who's always checking on their sources of supply. We need to get very clear about what emotional hooks feel like and where they've come from. If we're flaky with our no, then we got to own that too. If we confuse pity for love, then that means we'll always be susceptible to repeating the cycle of attracting people who we can rescue and feel sorry for. So we've got to be prepared to own all of those parts of ourselves. This exercise is about validating yourself, your reality, and what you experienced. This exercise is a reality checklist that you can keep close by and reread whenever you get into those nostalgic, sentimental moments where fantasy and reality are blurred. See, our brain has a tendency to maximize the good after a relationship has ended. We tend to romanticize and not be able to clearly see the reality of the experience. And with narcissistic, psychopathic relationships, as I explained in the previous video, we were intentionally programmed to stay with the abuser. And we naturally want to see the good in all people, but we lack discernment and tend to fall in love with someone's potential rather than their reality. And developing a discipline with our empathy is particularly challenging for those of us who naturally are kind and giving and loving. And I need to point out that this is not one of those really nice, lovely law of attraction lists where we create the ideal image of a perfect partner or list what our perfect future life would look like. And the reason why I say this is because although I do love all those positive exercises and visualizations and all those things wonderful, and they really do work, I believe that there is a time and place for those exercises as well. And initially, when we've woken up to the reality that we have been in a very abusive relationship, it's too high a jump for us vibrationally to go from anger, grief, to joy and happiness and excitement. And it's also been my experience and observation that people who have been truly victimized, that we tend to have an aversion to anything negative. And of course, because our life was just filled with negativity. So we tend to want to be hyper positive. It's almost as if we are overcompensating. And this is where we are drawn to things like positive affirmations, which are wonderful. However, deep down, we don't feel the congruency between what we're saying and how we're feeling, because we're participating in an internal dishonesty. And this messes up the whole entire manifestation process. And we falsely start believing that nothing good will ever come into our lives. A lot of these really great, well-intentioned, positive exercises can be used as a method of escapism. You need to get really honest with yourself and ascertain whether you're using those positive lists and wonderful affirmations, that it's not just another way for you to remain in denial, a way to put a band-aid on your pain. In these relationships, we've all spent enough time living with suppressing our emotions. So when we wake up, it becomes time to get real with how we authentically feel. We need to honor all the uncomfortable emotions. We need to connect to our authentic anger. We need to grieve our losses. Once we've processed all of those emotions, then it is a more appropriate time to focus on more of those positive lists. We must come to terms with what happened and describe how we were harmed, because communicating our pain reduces those triggers and allows the healing to begin. And creating your reality checklist allows you to look at life more realistically, rationally, and less emotionally. It really helped me with the worrying and the obsessive thinking. So this can help you stop abusing yourself mentally. See, it's not just about what they did to us, but owning the fact of what we keep doing to ourselves internally. It may also help you stop trying to get validation from others who clearly do not understand the nature of narcissistic abuse. Your friends and family may prefer for you to continue believing the illusion. They may even resort to using guilt, shame, and obligation to get you back in line so everything is nice again. So you can take a look at your checklist and remember a more factual, objective picture of your reality. And I also need to mention that only do this exercise once you have some psychological grounding. This is not meant to trigger you. It's about remembering but not re-experiencing. So if doing this exercise triggers emotional overwhelm, you may need to seek the help of an appropriate professional who can guide you. Someone who is a solid reference point for you. You might consider speaking with a person who witnessed the nature of the abuse and saw through the manipulation. So this safe person can help you verify facts, someone who can give you a reality check. So take a piece of paper and at the top of the list, you can title it The Reality Checklist. Underneath that heading, in bullet point, write down every memory of every incident that you felt demeaned, belittled, humiliated, attacked, dismissed. Write down the times of when you were gaslit, the times you recall that you had to question your sanity. Jot down the blatant lies that you were told, all the incidents revolving their pathological lying. For example, we may have gone to a great family holiday, but we tend to forget how we had to tolerate the endless convoluted conversations, the total disregard of our preferences, overwhelming feelings of anxiety, and walking on eggshells. Initially, I found this exercise really challenging to do because for me, the thought of this person's voice triggered a lot of panic. Whenever in their presence, my heart would race and I'd get knots in my stomach. And I somehow forgot these details whenever I was overcome by one of those nostalgic trances. So remind yourself of those details, how your body felt, what your intuition was communicating. So this is validating your body's sensations, what they were communicating to you about the true nature of this reality. We need to get very clear all the factual things that actually occurred, the cruel comments that were made, all the things that were projected onto you, how you lost yourself, how you lost your passion for life. What did you have to minimize or pretend not to see to keep up this charade of Disney family or the perfect marriage? What did this relationship cost you? Did you have to play it small and disregard important things to you? Did you have to put yourself last, betray yourself and your dreams? And for some people, what did it cost you financially to support this parasitic relationship? Did you have to give up your career so you could be their caregiver? Did you have to work 2 or 3 jobs to cover for their inability to be self-responsible or a willing, contributing partner in a relationship? So these are all the little things that we forget when we romanticize the past. So get real with your checklist. This is about your reality, your truth. You need to honor that. You owe it to yourself. Each of us needs to initiate this self-care and become our own savior and rescue ourselves. I blamed, felt overwhelmed, victimized, and complained for so long, never realizing that it was me who was abandoning myself, me who was neglecting to protect myself by not walking away, by going back to what I already knew was going to happen. We neglect ourselves because we've been taught to leave ourselves last and just tolerate whatever breadcrumbs were dished out. But maturity means that we recognize what's making us feel unwell. The other person can behave however they want, but we don't have to tolerate it. We don't have to buy what they're selling. You can't control others, but what you can control is how long you spend around them, and if you choose to participate or react to their dysfunctional behavior. So we all need to develop the wisdom of getting clear about what we can control and what we can't control. The programming that we receive in these relationships makes us believe that we are helpless. So we need to focus on what we can do. And it is not our place to want to change anybody. We need to allow others to be who they are, and then make our decisions based on what they're revealing to us about themselves. And learning to make these choices for ourselves enhances our self-esteem. This is how we figure out what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And it is a very uncomfortable and unfamiliar process, because the narcissist has always controlled and told us what we should be thinking and feeling. So this is about breaking that pattern and learning to make decisions for ourselves that are based on our well-being. The nature of a pathological narcissist is that they will never say sorry, let alone admit to the fact that their behavior has been so abusive. So you need to get very clear, discern for yourself, and remember the reality of a relationship that was extremely abusive and controlling. This is about you validating your reality, not the reality that the narcissist would like to interpret for you. And once we've looked at this checklist and confronted the reality of what an awful experience that actually was, we take off our rose-colored glasses and see it for the truth that it is. We can then make a firm decision and say to ourselves, I am not going to hold on to this. I let you go. I'm not going to be devastated. The world is not going to end. My life is not over. Sure, I may be overcome with anxiety and it might be challenging for a short amount of time, but I will find my way. I'll land on my feet and I trust myself to keep moving forward. And remind yourself that these experiences, no matter how many times you've gone back and forth, you will get crystal clear on what you don't want. So it's just too painful to keep holding on and repeating the same inevitable pattern. So once you've looked at this list, tell yourself, I'm going to let this go. I'm surrendering the pain, this repetitive cycle that just doesn't feel good in any way, shape, or form. And as you become consciously aware of what you're actually letting go, you can feel the relief in your body and in your mind. So the point is, you need to see it for what it is, and then you need to make a decision for yourself that you're going to let this go and you are not going to repeat this cycle. Nobody can do that for you. So this is a reality checklist that will prevent you from being hypnotized if you're still maintaining a detached, controlled contact. If you still have to see this person every so often. And I mean, you know, they will infect you with sob stories, pity plays, they'll recreate history and try and distort your memory, reminding you of how good you had it. They may even bribe you or sweet talk you. So be conscious of their agenda and remember that they are masters of deception. This isn't about care or love, it's about control. It's about them desperately trying to preserve their image or reputation and regain their control of your perception. So do not fall under this spell. Get clear. Whenever we enter this kind of trance, we energetically reconnect those cords. So get better at getting clear. Stop yourself from ruminating, dwelling, replaying scenarios and all of that. Anytime you expose yourself, you put yourself back at risk of their gaslighting. You risk losing yourself. So that is when we need to find our center. We need to align with what's true for us. So this exercise is about reclaiming your life and retrieving your soul. It's a really empowering exercise because it amplifies your clarity. See, the cure for repression is expression. So we don't want to waste time going back and forth with our decisions when we've gone no contact. This is how we practice decision making and letting our no mean no. But most of all, this exercise is a powerful tool in recognizing what toxicity actually is, so you can break free from it sooner. Feel free to reread your list whenever your ability to think clearly and rationally gets a bit blurry and you fall back into that high emotional state. There were days when I reread my list as if my life depended on it. And it did, because I wouldn't be here today if I had obediently followed most other people's advice about how they told me things were, that other people have it much worse. Basically, that I should just increase my tolerance to abuse. So without this list, I wouldn't be who I am here today. So I hope this suggestion can help you on your path, wherever that may be.